email address personally identifiable, even though obviously I can create any strange one. And it seemed to be because people could contact you in some way. And obviously today, there's a lot of different ways somebody can maintain state with me, perhaps even across devices, and have a profile and so forth. And so the concept of personal info, which I guess at one point intended to mean someone could actually connect it to my face or arrest me, and it also meant I could bring in a lot of other data about me. Well, that's kind of gone. We can correlate a lot of data about some entity and contact and interact with them. And so I think the FTC has started blurring that definition already in their online behavioral self-regulatory rules, where they said, look, maybe this data could become identifiable, but maybe it isn't. But you know what? Maybe it doesn't matter if you're going to tailor ads. Let's maybe go to the consumer protection side of the world and leave the privacy for a second. If you're going to do stuff that someone cares about, show them different things based on where they've done. Maybe that's a key feature. Maybe that's something they care about. So you ought to tell them about that because that's a key feature of the service you're providing. Yes, Salona. Salona of the League of Technical Voters and Citability. Are you worried that if we delete all this data, one of your concerns, transparency and being able to get back and find it, it won't be there? Does it hurt transparency?
The data mining work that we were doing, that we would be able to reverse engineer the census data within 5 years. Evidently some groups did it last year, so I was a little bit off in regards to the numbers. But instead of talking a lot of times about locking different things down, doing things of that nature, especially because some of the most important data we have no control over, which would be, to me, our space-time data, the GPS data on your cell phone. Instead, talking more about data ownership and data rights, and the mutual ownership of data that you have between yourself and these contracts that you end up making with these different companies. And sometimes you don't even end up making them, right? Like your GPS data with AT&T. Who's owning that? I actually got into an argument at a think tank that we were at in regards to that as to who owns that type of data. And so instead of taking it out of privacy and more into rights and things of that nature and being able to shut things down when somebody, say, you know, in the instance of school children, takes a picture of you passed out with writing on your forehead and posts it to their Facebook page, things of that nature. So rights, I suppose, is the main question there.
You know what, I'm going to jump to Deb Berlin, if I can. Go ahead. Thank you, Salona.
Thank you. Deborah Berlin with Consumer Policy. Yeah. Okay. Consumer Policy Solutions. And while I have a daughter who's a senior in college, and I'm very concerned about some of the questions you've raised, I want to turn to a different age group, older individuals, which many of you know I have a concern about. And in terms of online reputation and some of the statistics perhaps that you gather, the older population with the economy are also looking for jobs and are in the market. And I'm wondering, as we look at their also being very involved in social networking, if we have any information about how they are impacted in terms of their reputation online, how aware they are of online tools to protect their reputation.
Well, that's an interesting question. Look, I don't know that people have drilled down yet that far on this. This is still an area where the research is you know, open and wide, and so certainly an area for further work. Yes.
This is Joe Miller from the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. I want to pick up on what the young lady over here noted, and also the work of Larry Downs, and ask what the overarching thesis is here today. Is this an economic question about who owns the privacy, or is this really protecting the right of privacy? And if it's the latter, do we really have a right of privacy where GPS is tracking us all the time? Do we really have a reasonable expectation of privacy, and is it an economic question, or is it a question of the right?
Yeah, look, I'd argue it's a little bit of all of those. I don't think our overall perspective today, other than celebrating Data Privacy Day and releasing some of this research, focuses specifically on any of those. Clearly, these are all part of the general debate.
If the question is ownership of data, it's really hard to administer that. Listen, the copyright industries are currently trying to administer ownership of data, and look at the trouble they're having. Trying to administer a property right and information that's not transferable, or that you can withdraw at any time, very difficult, because personal information is like a volatile gas. Once it's out there, there might be hundreds or thousands of copies made just in the ordinary course of business. And so saying, I want my data back, and you can't have it, as if it's some kind of physical good, it's very hard to administer. So I think it's a neat idea. It would be great for people to have a property right in personal information, but drawing that gas back out of the air and putting it back in the bottle, really, really hard to administer.
And from the FTC's perspective, when we look at the privacy framework, we're looking at it through the lens of our authorities, first off. And that's to prevent unfair, deceptive acts or practices in the marketplace. So I'm not going to even attempt to try to translate that directly, but I mean, we're not starting from sort of just looking at the world and how should it be. That's part of it, but it is through the lens of our authorities.
Stephen.
Stephen Balcom with the Family Online Safety Institute. Great event, Jules, by the way. Thanks for this. The First Amendment is inscribed outside the front of this building, and just as important, I think, for our discussions is the Fourth Amendment, which is about unfair seizure of property and so on. And it's a little bit of a stretch here, but it came up in the State of the Net discussions yesterday about cloud computing, and how cloud computing, by the way, mixes up and upends this discussion even further. And how do we keep our own data private from our own government, particularly when it's lodged up in the cloud? And I'd be interested in your panel's reaction to that.
Cloud computing is one of the three sort of subject matter panels that they're looking at in Berkeley. The other two are social networking and mobile, going online through mobile devices. And the issues we're starting with, although there's going to be a discussion out there this afternoon, and maybe they'll go in different directions that we haven't foreseen, are is there a risk that data may be used in ways that it wasn't originally intended or understood, because it's you're pulling information from so many places and having it up in the cloud, and then you're sharing it again. And so what are the implications of that? And again, I don't have the answers, but it is an important thing that we're looking at, and the people who are studying that more closely are going to be paying very close attention to that panel.
Let me just throw, again, a plug in terms of the smart grid. The data traditionally that was in your home, at least, right, was protected under this First Amendment. In some of you who were here Monday heard me reference, this keynote decision that Justice Scalia wrote the lead about a guy who was growing weed in his home, and the heat was being detected by a device from the curb, and the cops didn't have a warrant, but they detected the heat, and so they went in and they busted him. And the question was, was this in his house? Was it out of his house? Was this an X-ray vision, or was this detecting heat from inside? And Scalia, despite you think of him as a law and order guy, of course, took the position that no, this was his house. But specifically what he said, and I have quoted this, was, of course this is in someone's home. Imagine if you could know when the lady of my accents are terrible, so I'm just going to stick with the Yiddish.
This is supposed to be Italian.
Imagine if you knew when the lady of the home was taking her bath. Clearly that would be an invasion and an intrusion. And here, with the smart grid, utilities or power meters or other intermediaries are going to know that the heat lamp in the bathroom is on and the lady of the home is taking her bath, but yet that data now is going to be outside your house, maybe, right? Maybe it doesn't need to be. Maybe it can stay at your home. And so I think these issues of who now is going to have more access to more data are proliferating in a whole bunch of ways, whether it's cloud or whether it's grid.
So the Keela decision is actually, I think, the beginning of a thread that might help solve the problem with cats